Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. So I want to make kind of a part two of the video that I released earlier today. If you haven't watched it, I encourage you to go back and watch it. It's the clickbaity one. I mean, not really. I do talk about China and their lockdown and food shortages and potential war with Russia and China. But the main point and the main focus of that video is talking about community, about tribes, prepping groups, mutual assistance groups, whatever you want to call it, because my opinion is that's really, really important. And in general, just having connections with others that are of like mind so that you can help each other out, depend on each other, provide security, just that communal experience, and that being able to kind of bounce ideas off of each other, and if nothing else, just the emotional support of all the things that are going through. And so that was a big focus of that video, and I do want to encourage you to go back and watch that one. And this one is kind of a part two. I wanted to just expand further on some thoughts and ideas on building that. And some of the things I'm going to say, you're probably going to, a lot of you are like, oh goodness, I'm not into that kind of stuff, but hear me out. And I'll also give you a few book ideas at the end of this. So let's just get right into it. It's very important. We don't need to discuss that again. If you're watching this, if you watched the other video, you're probably already thinking that just having that connection. And it doesn't matter, because a lot of people think that, and a lot of people want to have a community where everyone lives on the same property. And there are a few of those prepping type communities, some type of level of homestead preparedness. But the vast majority of us don't live like that. And that's okay. You can still have that same kind of community connection without everyone residing on the same property. But there was a time that people here in the United States actually were trying to do that in mass. I mean, there was a lot of people that were wanting to everybody live on the same property, and everyone kind of create their own their community and their counterculture and their counter economics and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of you know where I'm going with this. It was back during the whole hippie stuff, late 60s through the 70s, and even spilled into the early 80s as the hippies became kind of the back to the earth movement of people moving off into the woods, into the rugged areas. And a lot of the homesteaders that exist here in the Ozarks, the older ones, the ones that's been here for a while, actually came from that. I know several people that moved here back in the late 70s and early 80s here in the Ozarks, and that was their purpose. And they still very much live that life. In fact, there are a couple of hippie communes that still exist to this day. Now, am I suggesting for a moment that that's what you guys should strive for? No, that's not my style. Maybe that is for some of you, but that's not me. And typically those things tend to be very much of the socialist mindset and don't align with my religious beliefs very well. But it doesn't mean that we can't learn something from them and learn something from that movement, because there was a lot of failures during that movement. There are actually some pretty good documentaries out there that you can watch showcasing the failures and the reasons why many of them failed, and the few that were successful and why they were successful. And while we, and you and I, many of you and myself, do not share their ideology, certainly the basic tactics of how they did it, what worked and what didn't work, would very much apply to building a type of prepper network, community, tribe, crew, whatever you want to call it. And so I would strongly encourage you to look into that and to do some research. About 10 to 12 years ago, I became aware of the fact that through my preparedness, through my journey of self-sufficiency, that we really needed to focus on community, and that was something that our culture had lost. Once upon a time, that was just normal. You just knew your neighbors and you knew the people around you, and everyone pulled together. If you look at the Revolutionary War with all the militias that formed, those were just community people, excuse me. Same way with the Civil War, and even into World War I and World War II. You saw very much communities pulling together to help each other, and the men of those communities going off to fight in the wars. So this is something that has been the norm for the vast majority of the history of the United States, and only until recent times with modernization, technology, just a lot of factors have we really lost that. Um, and that whole kind of hippie commune movement tried to kind of bring it back. And while and largely unsuccessful, there's certainly a lot of things that we can learn from that. And that's what I realized 10 to 12 years ago. And so at that time, I started doing research into communes, why they failed, why many succeeded. And then I also looked into other communities that exist today that are successful, and the number one being the Amish community. And so over the last 10 to 12 years, I've done a lot of research. I've been on several of currently existing successful, what you would call a hippie commune. I've visited some. I've become very good friends with several Amish families in different Amish communities over the years also. So I've kind of developed a pretty good perspective of this. And I've learned that while each of these may have different ideologies, of course, I think most you and I would probably align closer with the Amish. There's certainly a lot of things that we can learn from them. So my big thought, my big tip to you is do that research yourself. Look into them. How did they work? And why did they fail? Why were some of them successful? And what did they learn about their failures and successes? And so that's a huge advantage right there. And even if you're not trying to build something on your own property or everyone come together and buy property together, if you're just trying to go from just kind of meeting together occasionally to actually building a functioning crew, a functioning tribe, a functioning mutual assistance group, or even just a trading network amongst you, looking into how Amish communities function and how a lot of these communes have functioned will actually be very, very beneficial to you. And so I would encourage you to do that. Like I said, there's documentaries out there that you can watch that have actually been quite well. I'm not quite sure some of the names. One of the ones I had watched, I had checked, and it used to be on Netflix. And I know many of us have gotten off Netflix, but I checked and I don't believe it's still there. But if you just get online and you search for documentaries, you should be able to find some. Some of these are probably on YouTube. YouTube does a lot of documentaries for free. So that's the number one thing, because this concept of people pulling together and kind of living outside the normal economy, the normal culture, it's not a new concept that we have to invent. This has been done since the dawn of mankind. And so instead of reinventing the wheel, let's learn what we can from all these other experiences and try to apply them to how they function. And one of the things that go along with that is us modern people. A lot of times we just don't know how to communicate too well anymore, especially the younger generation. They can communicate online, although not very well, but face to face, it's really difficult. And not just communicate, but actually work through their differences and accept each other for their differences. This is also some big issues that could face many of the prepping communities and networks as they build, because so many Americans just don't have that skill anymore. They don't understand that. Everything is so sterile with relationships nowadays that you just have enough of a relationship to benefit you and move on. And it's not so much of a relationships where both parties are very interdependent upon each other. Sure, you certainly want to retain your independence, but there is a balance there. And I remember reading about a Native American tribe once, and they said that when being interviewed and asked about this, that the community was only as strong as the individual, and the individual was only as strong as the community was. So this is a concept we've gotten away from. And in America, many of us have had so much drive to be independent and free of government that we've also freed ourselves from our communities. and that's not a good thing. And so we need to learn how to build those back. And maybe the existing community around you is not that, because it's part of the greater global modern community. But there's no reason why we cannot build our own communities separate of that. Some books that I wanted to mention there's only 3 here. But these are ones that stood out in my own book collection. And this first one is a really old one, I think. It looks old. Let me see. When was it printed? 1975. Yes, it's old. It's probably out of print, but it's very possible that you can find it used online. You know how it is. You can find these kind of stuff on eBay and stuff. This is a pretty good book. It's not a thick book, so it's an easy read. Now, mind you, this and well, all of these books that I'm going to mention to you, these are focused more in kind of the hippie preppers or the hippie commune type communities. But that does not mean that they would not apply to our type of community also. So again, don't shun them. You know, don't shoot the messenger just because you don't like the story. The messenger can have a lot of information. So this is one of the books that I have that's actually pretty good. It does talk about like economies, how to develop economies and cooperation between people, neighbors. This is really more focused on like a neighborhood, but it certainly could apply to our situation. And another one, a newer book, I think you can probably still get it on Amazon, Reinventing Community, Stories from Walkways of Co-Housing. Of course, this is more kind of hippie co-housing type stuff. But certainly there's stories in here on just how to get along, you know, how to make things work. And it's a good book. And the last one I want to mention, I think it's a really good one and highly recommend for those that are really dedicated to this. Again, this comes from a hippie perspective, but that's okay. It's Creating a Life Together, Practical Tools to Grow Eco-Villages and Intentional Communities, which even though intentional communities, that term is typically referring to like a hippie type of community. If you're trying to develop a preparedness community, whether it's on the same property or just a network of people that live in a specific locale, you know, if you say, well, we're all 10 miles in a 10-mile radius of each other or something like that, that's an intentional community. You have a specific intention to your community. You have a specific goal. And so that's what that would be called. And so something like this, it talks about establishing, you know, hierarchy, you know, who's in charge, you know, how do you pay for things as a group, you know, how do you get along? So this is a good one also. There are other books out there, and I would encourage you to do that. I would also encourage you, if you have Amish in your area, get to know them. And research about them. There's books on the Amish too that are really good, and it talks about how their communities work and function. And of course, their communities are based on something very different than hippie communities. But in the end, they function in a lot the same way, where they still retain their individuality, but yet the importance of the community is far, far more important than our modern era, where our communities aren't really important to us anymore, and that's why they're all falling apart, and you know, high crimes and are horrible, and we only focus on individual needs. And I'm not one of those that do not think that individual needs aren't important. They are important. Individual needs are important, and I'm very much you know, believe in individual liberty. But I also believe that we are designed and created to work together with each other and to have a community, and that is one of the most important things, very possibly second only to your spiritual walk, that's going to really benefit you in all the things that are happening in this world. So I hope that helps you. Hope that these books could help you. And if you have any questions, I'm certainly no expert on this, but it is something that I have done a lot of research in over the years. You're welcome to ask a question down in the description or the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer it. All right, folks, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.